Hi there, and welcome to Chapter 19. Chapters 2 and 19 will be on the next test. This chapter concerns over-the-counter drugs, herbal medications, and treatments that are considered alternative. And then we're going to recap vitamins and minerals some, even though I know you've already had that with Miss Hill. So this is a pretty long lecture. The chapter itself is not that long, but there's a lot of material covered. So it's 346 to 359 in your textbook, and then your ATI pages are 217 to 226. So when we look at this chapter, we're going to be talking about the self-care that a patient will provide for themselves. The last time I looked up the sales figures, 2010, over-the-counter sales of self-care and over-the-counter drugs total $18 billion, and this does not include Walmart. Probably Walmart by itself is another $18 billion for medications and treatments and things to make themselves feel better. And you can get on this link if you want to from the American College of Preventive Medicine and just read about what people spend from their own pockets on making themselves feel better and what they call wellness. According to a link at the NIH website, National Institutes of Health, we as Americans spend about $30 billion out of our own pocket. Insurance does not cover that, on complementary and alternative medications. Now, common influences for seeking things to make yourselves feel better many times come from friends, kind of a word of mouth. You notice that a friend is particularly upbeat and perky, and you say, wow, you really look like you feel good. Oh, I do, because I'm doing this, such and such a thing. And you should do it too, because you'd feel as good as I do. We also watch a lot of TV and various kinds of shows on the internet have advertising that is considered direct to consumer. You can't browse through Facebook without them reading your mind and putting up a bunch of advertisements on things that you've thought about. And if you have looked into different kinds of wellness issues, they're going to advertise directly to you. You will find that as you progress in your career, you're going to hear those 5 dreaded words. You're a nurse, aren't you? And so you're going to get all sorts of questions on medications, treatments. You're going to have people wanting to show you all kinds of funky rashes and bumps and discharges, and they want to get your advice, because people feel very comfortable getting information from somebody they trust. There is progressively less trust in the medical profession and government agencies, unfortunately, and people tend to seek other avenues of information. On page 347 in the textbook, you see a list of why over-the-counter meds differ from prescription meds in 5 different ways. And you need to make sure you look over those. When it comes to us as nurses documenting patient healthcare practices, we have to have a certain amount of knowledge when it comes to over-the-counter drugs and drugs that are available through health food stores and other sources. We have to kind of be familiar with a lot of things you can buy over the counter and what they contain. So things like over-the-counter pain relievers, over-the-counter medications for gas and bloating and indigestion, over-the-counter sleep meds. We have to be familiar with those ourselves because people are taking a lot of these. We have to be able to be educated and warn our own patients about what to expect when it comes to an interaction of over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs. A lot of times patients who don't know a whole lot about medications think that because a medication is sold on the drugstore shelves, that there are no side effects, no adverse effects, and they can take them with other meds without there being any problems, and that is just definitely not the case. And then there is a lot of growth in what we call complementary and alternative medicines, or CAM treatments. Product labeling, we have to know where information is so we can call our attention to it when we're teaching patients. We need to understand the role of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA does a lot of overseeing of what can be called a drug and what information the labels have to contain, but you can kind of understand why, since we looked back at chapters 2 and 3 and we read about the whole thalidomide issue and what happens when people take a drug that is harmful but nobody knows it. So the FDA requires the product label on over-the-counter medications to have all the information that the average person needs to know. It's written all over the side and sometimes in inserts inside, and the print can be very small, but it has to be available for the average person to be able to understand. It's said now that the average American reads at about a 5th to 7th grade level. So many people don't read as well as that. Many people read things that are much more complicated. But the average American doesn't really want to do a whole lot of reading unless it's somewhere in that 5th to 7th grade level. And so the FDA requires label information to have all this information that is readily available. On Table 6.1, page 348, we see a whole list of hidden ingredients. These are substances that are mixed with our over-the-counter meds. Alcohol is very common. People don't think about it, but it's in a lot of cough medications, cold meds, mouthwashes, skincare products, like shaving lotions, things like that. And people don't even realize it or think about it. Also, lots of caffeine. If something advertises as something that's going to give you pep and energy and cut down your appetite, many times it's going to have caffeine or caffeine's chemical cousin. Some medications have a lot of sugars. If they have an ingredient that ends in ose, O-S-E, like maltose, dextrose, fructose, sucrose, those are sugars that people might not really realize. We get enough sugar that we do realize, let alone stuff that's hidden, and we have to educate people about that. Many minerals are in things that we wouldn't expect, like a lot of our antacids, over-the-counter antacids, contain aluminum, calcium, sodium, magnesium, things that our body needs and that we get from foods, but people who have cardiac issues and renal issues really need to be careful of what minerals they're taking in without some advice from their healthcare provider.